Hello everybody. Today I would like to talk to you about my deck that is called King Suleiman and his army. As you can see, it features King Suleiman and all Djinn and Efreet from 93-94, except for the red ones, because they're not really splashable. So I had a lot of fun playing this deck. I played it in 2 Odal tournaments, and in one tournament my record was 3-2, and in another one I was a bit less lucky, so I won only 1 out of 4 matches. But still, I really enjoyed playing this deck. It's really flavorful, and it's a pretty straightforward solution, but still we know how iconic these cards are. So let's talk about everything here. We start with the mana base, of course. I tried to put all of the best cards I have there, and we have got all of the Moxen in the right colors. So only Mox Ruby is missing, of course. So there is Mox Sapphire, there is Mox Pearl. We also had a Black Lotus, of course, which was definitely helpful here. Soul Ring, Strip Mine as an auxiliary card. And of course, when you play Ribbon Knights, you should play Library of Alexandria as well. It was relevant in some games, I would say. 4 Cities of Brass. I should say that maybe I was a little bit too careful with the mana base. As you can see, it features a ton of lands, but I never wanted to be low on mana, and I still was sometimes, right? So there are 4 tropical islands, because we shouldn't forget that in old school Magic, land destruction is quite common. Everybody has got a strip mine, and you can definitely expect to see some ice storm, stone rains, Armageddons even. Chaos Orb can also target your lands. So whenever you're building a deck, you should expect that at least a couple of your lands per game might be destroyed. And of course, this will usually be the lands that you need the most. So of course, I tried to include all of the blue duels in the highest quantity, but I also had 2 savannas, because our second main color, I would say, is green, and also 2 bayous, because I did want to have black mana sometimes. And there is the interesting thing here. So there is 1 island, a beautiful altered island, and also Teleria. Teleria is the card that can help my Serendip Djinn. So this is the reason I included, and also because the art here is absolutely fantastic. I just love it. So, about King Suleiman. King Suleiman, as you know, is the same as Solomon. It depends on the language from which this name was borrowed. And here we can actually read the flavor text. And even in the flavor text from the Quran, we can see that Solomon had some jinns that were enslaved by him, some devils, as they're mentioned here. So Efreet of the genies is actually complicated. I'm not going too deep into that, especially because I didn't read the source in the original language. But the idea is that King Suleiman was so wise and powerful that he was able to enslave some of these Djinn and Efreeti. Some sources say that he managed to trap them in a bottle or a flask. But as you can see here, even though it is mentioned in the flavor text, he does not control, even though it would be really cool. Efreets or Djinns, or genie and Efreeti is the preferred plural form, but he just taps to destroy an Efreet or Djinn. So, of course, I very often sided him out in game 2 or 3, but it was somehow useful, because as you understand, Serendip Efreet is probably one of the most popular creatures in old school Magic nowadays. So, speaking of Serendip Efreet, I have got a playset, of course. So I had 4 of the most playable Efreets and Djinns, and of course they rarely disappointed me. except for the cases when we had some kind of a stalemate, or my opponent would tap them with Icy Manipulator, or some other situations where they couldn't really use them, so then they just deal damage to you, and it can become pretty annoying fast. Next, the only case of creature type change. As you can see, Old Man of the Sea says summon Married, but Married is no other than Djinn under modern rules. So it's some very good tip for you all in case you are trying to build a kind of a tribal deck or just looking for some synergy between your cards. Always check the creature types, because sometimes it's counterintuitive how they were changed. I mean, if we talk about Goblin King, nowadays he's not a lord, but he is a goblin, right? And same can be said about Lord of Atlantis. Actually, he might be Goblin and Lord, I don't remember exactly, but the thing is that they are also sharing this creature type with the creatures that they pump. But if you talk about something else, the type of zombies is incredibly big nowadays. If you want to check it, if you talk about 2024, it became 3 times larger than in the past. So yes, again, about Old Man of the Sea, you don't see this card very often. You might hear about it quite often because it's a great collectible card. But let's see what exactly he does. So you tap to gain control of a creature with power no greater than his power. So that's usually 2, because we don't have any ways to pump him. If he is untapped, you lose control. You may choose not to untap, you lose control. So blah, blah, blah. This is just like Preacher, for example. But again, the idea is that you can tap him and gain control of a creature. How useful is that? It's actually quite useful, because very often you can fight against Savannah Lions, against some smaller creatures like Curd Apes, Sargothian Pixies, Elvish Archers, and even against Mishras, even though that's a bit tricky, because your opponent will usually know that. They will try to pump Mishra, and then it wouldn't work. So yeah, here you should be a bit more careful. But one very important thing I would like to remind you is that this doesn't mean 1-for-1, right? And Preacher also doesn't mean 1-for-1, because generally when you tap that, you gain control of your opponent's creature, and then you can start attacking aggressively or just use it as a jump blocker, and as soon as your opponent's creature is dead, you can use Old Man of the Sea again. So this is actually a very powerful effect that I did use sometimes, and it didn't really disappoint me, so that was cool. However, talking about disappointing cards, as much as I love the art on Djinn and Efreet, he still is pretty weak. And he also forced me to have 2 black mana, because sometimes I did play him and I had to keep this mana open to maintain him, and also he's not bolt proof, sadly. It would have helped greatly if he was 3-4. So yeah, I just had him, and the art is absolutely amazing. I love this card still, but only 1 copy because of the overall low power level, which can be said about Urnam Djinn. So we all know Urnam Djinn, we love Urnam Djinn, and I did have some forced, so this effect usually worked. But of course, he is also a target for your opponent's removal. If they have got Swords to Plowshares, for example, you can be absolutely sure that this will fly at him very soon. But the thing is that he's also very splashable, so that's a great card overall. Now, the card that I'm actually playing for the first time, despite having it for a very long time, is Efreet, and I must say that I absolutely love this card. You know how the effect works. You can pay, or your opponent can also pay 1 green to have him deal 1 damage to each player and each flying creature. So what's great about that is that even though it is a kind of a drawback, we can say on the one hand, on the other hand, this can act as direct damage to finish your opponent. This can act, of course, as somewhat direct damage, we can say, to finish your opponent's flying creatures after you have attacked and they blocked, for example. But the problem is that it can also be used by your opponent in case they have got enough green mana. And of course, this can destroy Efreet himself, but it can also destroy some other creatures of yours, such as Djinns and Efreets and Djinns and Efreets, so we have to be quite careful here. Soon I will start uploading matches from the 2 Odol tournaments that I played, and you will see that sometimes he really saved me, really won me some games, and sometimes I was in a bit of a trouble because of him. But there is one very important thing. Just in advance, I would like to say that I did have Spirit Link, and Spirit Linking your Efreet is amazing, because even if there are no other creatures in play, no other creatures with flying, as soon as you put Spirit Link on your Efreet, every activation will gain you 3 life, right? Because you get 1 life from damaging your opponent, 1 life from damaging himself, and 1 life, basically this is the damage that is prevented to you. And if you have got more, you can imagine what kind of hilarious things are going to happen. So really happy about this card. Cannot say the same thing about Serendip Djinn. So it is a very powerful card, of course, and I love the idea with these Djinn and Efreet cards in old school Magic that they try to make them very powerful, unwieldy, and you feel that as soon as you play them, you understand that they're very powerful, they're strong, but sometimes the drawbacks can become overwhelming, and you really have this feeling of not having any control over your own creatures. So if we see how he reads, well, he just has a 2 mana discount compared to Mahamot Djinn, and sometimes this is relevant. Of course, if I had more of these, that would be a bit better, because there was basically no guarantee that I would have him early in the game and not later in the game when I actually did have enough mana to play such a creature without a drawback. But still, during your upkeep, we must choose one of the lands and destroy it. If it's an island, then you get 3 damage. And you cannot choose not to sacrifice a land. And I remember that in one game it was absolutely atrocious. I basically fed him all of the lands that I had. Some of these were islands, and I couldn't really attack with him. And in the end, he died after having destroyed all of my lands. So that was a good example of what he's capable of. But of course, usually you would just start sacrificing Bayou, Savannah, Tolaria maybe to him, and sometimes you can occasionally sacrifice an island to him, but he will be able to deal a lot of damage. Now, Djinn doesn't require any kind of an introduction. He is incredibly powerful. It's an iconic card. This is probably the most iconic card in old school Magic nowadays, just based on how people like it. And it is very powerful. I'm not going to argue with that. Just no need to describe this card for a long time. Now, you can see that Mahamot Djinn is one card that is not like the others. Why? Because it doesn't have any drawback. And the reason for that is very simple. It was initially printed in Alpha, and in Alpha they didn't have this idea that Djinns and Efreets must have a drawback. So he is unique in that way, and he is quite powerful. And this can only be proven by the fact that later on, when similar cards were printed, such as Sibylian Spirit, and I don't remember the name of the Djinn that was in Invasion, which was his exact copy but strictly worse, with -2/-2, if you don't have some specific kinds of lands. So definitely a rather powerful card. Some people say that it's a bit too much, but it depends on the deck you are playing. In my deck it worked quite well, and again with Spirit Link it works like a charm. So the last, so to say, Djinn related card is Bottle of Suleiman, and it is a coin flipping card, which is already fun. I believe I still haven't played any coin flipping cards, have I? I don't think so. Actually, that's a nice idea to use such cards more often. So for 4 mana, you just play this card, and for 1 mana, basically it's just 5 mana to cast and activate. You flip a coin. If you win, then you get a 5/5. Here he is, Djinn of the Bottle token. It is an artifact creature. That's a bit, I would say, of a drawback, because it can be destroyed by artifact removal, but it's a 5/5 flying creature, which is definitely very powerful, only second to Serendip Djinn and Mahamot Djinn in terms of power and toughness, and no drawbacks actually. But the drawback is that you might actually lose this flip, and not only did you waste a card and 5 mana, but you also wasted 5 life, which is a lot. And in the second tournament, as you will see, I actually managed to summon him 2 times. That was really lucky. But in the first tournament, no matter how many times I played, I think I lost all of them, or maybe only once did I have the Djinn of the bottle, but still have him killed immediately. So yeah, and it's just not an optimal card, so sometimes I ended up siding it out of my deck. So finally we have got the power, of course, Ancestral Recall. We've got the restricted cards such as Demonic Tutor to search for the relevant answer, or maybe just a big Djinn, or maybe even Spirit Link. I had 4 of them, so as I have told you, I used Spirit Link on my big creatures, and of course it also works as a pseudo removal against your opponent's creatures, but it's just more fun to enchant your own big guys in this deck. And speaking of power, we also have got, of course, Time Walk here, and to make use of these powerful cards, we also have got a Regrowth, and we have a modest counter spell package here, 4 counter spells. One of them is Mana Drain, and we have also got the sideboard. Sideboard is nothing really special here. I'm not really good at making up a sideboard, and especially here I didn't want to think about it too much. I just wanted to play some cards that I don't play that often, I would say. So yeah, we had a counter spell, 1 more of them, and I also tried Flash Counter. Can't say that I'm happy with this choice, but what I am happy with is Control Magic. So Control Magic was relevant in some matches. I always love this card as a sideboard card. And for the first time I tried Island of Wak Wak. So Island of Wak Wak, if you look at it, tap to reduce target flying creature's power to 0. It does look like Maze of Fifth with some more limited use, but it's actually much better because, number one, you can use it to nullify your opponent's blockers and attackers as well, of course, and also you don't have to untap their attacking creatures. So in some cases it's actually much better than Maze of Fifth, and of course it's an amazing, iconic and rather rare card, so I'm really happy about playing that. And also a favorite of mine, no matter how many times I play and see that it's actually quite bad, I still want to go with it because I just want to destroy Mishra's. Maybe it's not the best choice. So the worst choice with my sideboard is Animate Dead. I don't even know why I decided to do that in the first place, because very often I would not be able to kill my opponent's creatures directly, and counter spell, not really much hope to use that. So I don't know, this was probably the worst decision, but I did have 4 disenchants, because guess which card we are afraid with this, when we have basically got all Arabian Nights cards, right, except for some core set cards, of course, but all of our permanents with some minor exceptions. I mean, the overwhelming majority of permanents we've got are from Arabian Nights, including, of course, the lands. So this is, of course, deadly. So my way of fighting against that was disenchant, but this, of course, didn't help me because I still got destroyed by that card. So anyway, thank you for watching. You will see this deck in action quite soon. I hope you enjoyed. I really did have a blast playing this one, and definitely should look forward to more deck videos, some flavorful decks sometimes, some spicy decks, but also, of course, some more tournament worthy deck. This is somewhere in between, more on the spicy side, but still is a bit, I would say, helped by the presence of the more powerful cards. So anyway, thank you for watching again, and I will see you around. Please look forward to the matches using this deck and a lot more different stuff. That is it. Bye.